Okay, we're picking up on the cliffhanger here. So last video we were solving quadratic equations and everything is going well, just using the same method we've always done. And then we came to this one and the method didn't work. Because again, if I try to undo whatever's been done to the x, there's different things being done to these individual x's. There's an x squared, that's being squared. That one's being multiplied by 7. And so I can't undo, I can't just undo it because there's two different ones. And also I can't combine the x's together because they're not like terms. So I cannot add x squared to 7x. So I'm stuck. I have to come up with a different method. So what do? Well, our friend, the zero products rule. You may or may not have heard of this, but it's going to become your good friend. And the zero products rule says if you have a something times something equal to 0, that means, so if this is true, then either A has to be 0 or B has to be 0. Notice this is called the zero products rule, not the 2 products rule or the 5 products rule, because if A times B equals 2, notice this statement down here is not true. You can't say that either A is 2 or B is 2. That would not be true. But you can say it in the case of 0. If you multiply two things together and get 0, the only way that can happen is if one of those things is 0. Because that's the only way you can get 0 in multiplication, is by multiplying 0 by something else. You'll never multiply two non-zero numbers and get 0. So this implies that one of your factors has to be 0. So we're going to use that, because notice here we have something added together to get 0. But that doesn't, so the zero products rule doesn't apply yet, because it doesn't say if you have something plus something equals 0, one of them has to be 0. It says if you have something times something. So what we need to do is we need to turn this into something times something. Now, fortunately, we've been practicing factoring, because that's exactly what factoring does. It takes something and turns it into something times something. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor this thing, and that would be x, and looks like maybe 3 and 4, and plus and plus. So now you notice we have a something times something equals 0. So you could say, like in this case, if we're using this idea, my A is x plus 3, and my B is x plus 4. So that means that based on the zero products rule, that means that either x plus 3 is equal to 0 or x plus 4 is equal to 0. One of these has to be true. And since we're looking for all solutions, that means every number that I can replace x with that'll make this equation true, we're actually going to solve both of these, because either one of these could be a good solution. So how do I solve this equation? I just subtract 3 from both sides, and I get x equals -3. How do I solve that equation? I just subtract 4 from both sides, and I get x equals -4. So my two solutions would be x equals -3 and x equals -4. Isn't that cool? So now we have a new method for solving quadratic equations. So let's look at a couple more. Let's say we have x squared plus 8x plus 15. No, let's change it up a little bit. Let's say that's equal to -15. Okay? So now we see the quadratic, we see there's an x and an x squared. So we're not going to be able to use our traditional method of just undoing everything. So we have to come up with a new idea. The new idea is the zero products rule, right? So in order to use the zero products rule, we have to have everything equal to 0. So my first move here would be to add 15 to both sides. So that would be x squared plus 8x plus 15 equal to 0. Now we have set it up equal to 0, but we still don't have something times something equals 0. So we're going to have to factor this. So we use our incredible factoring skills and go x, and 3 and 5, and plus, and check it to make sure it works. Yep, it works. And so then we know, according to the zero products rule, that x plus 3 has to be equal to 0, or x plus 5 has to be equal to 0. Which gives me an x equals -3, or x equals -5. And again, both of those would be my answers because I'm looking for all possible solutions. Okay. So basically, we could just keep doing, this is a great new method. And so let's try it a couple more times to make sure we understand it. Well, let's actually back up a little bit. And again, if it comes not in perfect, let's say we have an x squared is equal to 5x minus 15 or something like that, right? When we see a quadratic, first thing to do is check and see if it has an x term and an x squared, because then that means we're going to have to use the zero product rule, because the normal method won't work. And once we recognize that there's an x squared and an x, then our next step is to get everything equal to 0, because we're going to try to use the zero products rule, right? So we'd subtract 5x from both sides. Get x squared minus 5x is equal to negative 15. Then we'd add 15 to both sides, and we get x squared minus 5x plus 15 equals 0. Now we have it set equal to 0. Then our next step is to get it to be something times something equals 0, which means we're going to factor, right? And we get x and x. And we're looking for a sum of 5 from factors of 15. So let's see, the factors of 15 are 15 times 1, 3 times 5, and that's it, isn't it? So do any of those add up to 5? Whoa, they don't, do they? So this is not factorable. Now that's a problem, isn't it? That's a big problem, because we need to have this in terms of a times b equals 0 to use this zero products rule, right? And so if we can't write it as something times something equals 0, then we can't use that method. Because, again, a plus b equals 0 does not imply that a or b is 0, right? Only this implies that a or b is 0. So we're stuck. Our method ran out. That's okay. We have some other methods, but I'm going to end this video for right now. Again, as a cliffhanger to see, you'll be dying to see the next video. Well, hopefully not dying. You'll just be really desirous to see the next video. So I'm going to pause this, and when we come back, we'll talk about how to handle that guy.